What if everything you thought you knew about Marie Antoinette was wrong? She's been called Madame Deficit, accused of saying let them eat cake, and blamed for the fall of a monarchy. But strip away the powdered wigs, the diamond necklaces, and the Versailles gossip, what do you find? A scared teenage girl, a misunderstood queen, and a face immortalized in wax, perhaps the truest reflection of who she really was. This is her story, told not by scandal but by history, science, and the silent truth of her death mask. She was born Maria Antonia Josepha Johanna in 1755 in the grand but cold halls of Vienna's Hofburg Palace. The 15th child of Empress Maria Theresa Marie, was never meant to rule. She was bright, musically gifted, and charming, but barely literate in German and poorly educated compared to her siblings. At 14, she was packaged as a diplomatic bride. Her marriage to the Dauphin of France, Louis Auguste, was not love, it was strategy. And on the border between Austria and France, she was stripped of everything Austrian, even her name. She crossed into France as Marie Antoinette, a girl leaving behind childhood identity and innocence. To outsiders, Versailles was paradise, but to Marie, it was a prison dripping in gold. Imagine this: you can't eat without an audience, you can't walk freely, you can't even close your door, courtiers scratched instead of knocking. And all the while you're seen as foreign, suspicious. France had a deep-rooted distrust of Austria. The people called her the Austrian woman. She didn't speak French fluently. She missed her family. And her husband, Louis Auguste, shy, awkward, and uninterested. It took them 7 years to consummate the marriage. All of Versailles whispered, and Marie, still a teenager, was drowning in scrutiny. So she turned to distraction. She escaped into fashion: gigantic wigs, towering hats, extravagant gowns. She gambled, hosted operas, threw masked balls, but the more she indulged, the more she was mocked. Pamphlets depicted her as frivolous and immoral. Rumors spread like fire. When the people starved, her dresses were crimes. When the flour ran out, her pearls were curses. And then someone falsely claimed she said, "Let them eat cake." She didn't. The phrase existed decades earlier. But truth didn't matter anymore. Marie wasn't just a queen, she was a symbol of everything wrong with France. Then came the final scandal, the affair of the diamond necklace. A schemer forged Marie's signature. A necklace worth 1.6 million livres, enough to fund an army, was supposedly bought in her name. She had refused the necklace, twice, but the lie stuck. The public believed she had stolen from the crown to fund her vanity. The phrase Madame Deficit went viral before the internet even existed. For the peasants of France, it wasn't about facts, it was about anger. The queen was now the enemy. 1789. France erupted. The Bastille fell. The people rose. And in October, an angry mob armed with pitchforks and rage stormed Versailles. Marie hid with her children. Guards died. Gates fell. And then she walked to the balcony, alone, with rifles pointed at her heart. She bowed, and in that second they didn't scream. They saluted. Long live the Queen. But it wasn't enough. The royal family was forced to Paris. Their power, their freedom gone. 1793. The monarchy had fallen. Louis XVI was executed. Marie, now a widow and prisoner, waited in a damp stone cell. She wrote letters to her children, hoped for exile. Instead, she was sentenced to death. Her hair was cut, her hands bound. She wore a plain white gown, and as the cart rolled toward the guillotine, she apologized to the executioner for stepping on his foot. Her final words, "Pardon me, sir. I did not do it on purpose." At 12:15 p.m. the blade fell. But her story didn't end there. Madame Tussaud took her death mask. Not a painting, not a rumor, but her real face. Compared to her royal portraits, it was jarring. No pouty lips, no exaggerated eyes, no opulence. Just a woman. Tired, dignified, haunted. Marie Antoinette was not a monster. She was a mirror. A symbol of a dying era. Born into excess, buried by revolution. But behind the myth was a girl who didn't choose the crown. She just wore it. And now, thanks to wax portraits and truth, we can finally see her. Critics laughed when they saw it. A queen, pretending to be a peasant, but in truth the queen's hamlet, a small mock village Marie built in the Versailles gardens, wasn't for show. It was her escape, away from gossip, away from rigid ceremony. Here she could walk freely, feed chickens, talked to farmers. But the public didn't see simplicity, they saw mockery. How dare she play at poverty while France starves? To Marie it was sanity. To the people it was insult. And once again what she meant didn't matter. June 1791. Desperate, terrified, Marie finally convinced Louis they had to flee. Disguised as a governess and valet, the royal family slipped out of Paris in a dark carriage. But the plan was flawed, too slow, too grand, too royal. They were recognized near Varennes by a postmaster, captured, brought back under armed guard. The people didn't cheer. They stood in silence. That silence spoke louder than any words. The monarchy was dead. Her story didn't end with the guillotine. It continued in wax. Madame Tussaud, once her court sculptor, molded her face in silence, not for honor, but for remembrance. In that mask we don't see a queen. We see bone, weariness, humanity. Today her image is everywhere, from movies to magazines, but only the mask remains unchanged. A woman, a warning, not a villain, not a saint, just Marie. Before the crown, before the scandal, there was a girl in Vienna. Maria Antonia grew up in a palace that was colder than it looked, a child barely noticed amid 16 siblings. Yet destiny would demand she face a nation's rage alone. France was bleeding money. Decades of war, indulgence, and corruption were the cause. But the people didn't see ministers or kings, they saw her. Her jewels, her hair, her dresses. She became the scapegoat of an empire collapsing under its own weight. She was a queen, but also a mother. Marie longed for privacy, warmth, and connection, but every birth was political. Every child a symbol of succession, of diplomacy, of legacy. She loved them deeply, but Versailles never let her just be maman. She missed home. Letters were her only lifeline to Vienna until they were intercepted. France feared Austrian influence. Even her own blood became suspect. She was a queen with no country, and soon no allies. Her trial was swift. Facts were twisted. Rumors made into charges. The people wanted blood, and the guillotine was hungry. Her dignity never cracked, but the verdict was sealed long before the gavel fell. She didn't just fall. She became a symbol of tyranny, of excess, of decadence. Her name was dragged through pamphlets and prison. Her identity rewritten by angry pens. Marie the human was lost. Marie the enemy remained. Time has a strange way of healing and rewriting. Now Marie is seen less as a monster, more as a victim. A girl born into gold, destroyed by revolution, remembered in wax. Not for what she said, but for how she lived and how she fell. Not everyone turned on her. Behind the silk curtains a few remained, loyal maids, nobles, and old friends. They passed notes, smuggled messages, tried to soften her fall. But loyalty was dangerous, and secrets in Versailles never stayed hidden long. Walk the halls of Versailles today, and you might feel her. Not the queen in portraits, but the girl behind the mask. The echo of footsteps, the hush of silk. Marie Antoinette never truly left, because some legacies no guillotine can erase. She was born into a throne and died beneath a blade. Marie Antoinette lived between two collapsing worlds, old Europe and revolutionary France. She didn't shape the tide of history. She was swallowed by it. But in that collision, her story became immortal. What can we learn from a queen who lost everything? That image is power. That perception becomes truth. That women in power are judged harshest, then remembered differently. Her silence in death spoke louder than her life of ceremony. A lesson dressed in silk, but written in blood. Beneath the powder, beyond the rumors, there was a girl. A queen, a prisoner, a mother, and finally just a face. Thanks to wax memory and history, Marie Antoinette no longer belongs to Versailles. She belongs to all of us now, not just as royalty, but as a reflection of everything we still wrestle with today.